Welcome. My name is Stephanie Klotz, and I am here to talk to you about teen dating abuse, what parents need to know. And as you may know, February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And it's really important, I think, that we are talking about this issue. I think sometimes we minimize it or are scared to kind of get into the fact that this is happening for teens that are dating and can have really serious consequences. So I'm really excited to be bringing this information to you all tonight and hope that it inspires you to think about warning signs, to be talking to your teens, to be aware of dating violence in a different way. So first, what we're going to do is just kind of identify, what do we mean by dating abuse? How do we define it? What does it look like? How common is it? Then we're going to look at some potential warning signs. And of course, we're going to discuss how we can talk to teens about it. So the most important thing to know is that when we talk about any sort of dating abuse or interpersonal abuse, we're looking at a pattern of behaviors that are used to establish and maintain control of one person over the other. And this includes all different types of abuse: physical, sexual, coercion, right? Coercive control, emotional abuse is really common, often how it starts out, isolation. But really what it's all about is that one person is seeking that power and control. Without that, you know, there might be a time where someone calls their partner a name. It's not a good behavior, but that's not the dynamic that we're talking about tonight. We're talking about really this pattern of behaviors that are used. And, you know, it impacts all populations, young, old, every socioeconomic background, every race, every geographical location. You look and you'll see this dynamic at play. So what you're seeing here is the dating and relationship power and control wheel. And this is really how we're able to understand what abuse is. Notice that power and control is at the center, because this is really what drives the behavior. And then you will see the different tactics of abuse around that center of power and control. What's really important to note is that these things, it's not just that one partner creates a rule about, you're not allowed to hang out with friends. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Steph. Just like one little thing about dating me is that you're only going to be allowed to hang out with me. That's not a big deal, right? Like, you don't need to have friends and family. Oh, you're good with that? Perfect. No, that's not how it starts out, but it could be, when I have plans, coercing me into canceling with my friends to stay home with my partner. And, how many times do I have to cancel on my friends before they stop inviting me? How long do I have to go without hanging out with my friends before it feels strange for me to share? If I did have something happen with my partner that feels scary, right? Oh, you've ditched us. Now you want to talk about it. So, you know, these things creep in a slow and insidious way, right? They're a pattern. And, using jealousy, using love as a excuse, these things cannot, or I'm sorry, these things can sometimes feel positive to young people. Oh, they're so jealous, right? And maybe I modify my behavior because that person's jealous, but that creates a dangerous dynamic, right? That now not only am I adjusting my behavior, right, to their desires, but also I'm kind of taking on the idea that I'm responsible for their behavior, right? That I can control them feeling jealous and whatever it is they do when they feel jealous. And so, this is really our model for understanding dating abuse. It's our model for understanding really any dynamic of intimate partner abuse. And all of these things, not every relationship has every component of this, but certainly all relationships that have this dynamic of power and control have different tactics from different areas that are working together to create that dynamic. And when we think about how common it is, 1 in 11 teens, female teens, and 1 in 14 male teens in the past year experienced physical dating violence, right? That is a huge number, and much higher number, right? 1 in 3 adolescents experience physical or sexual violence in some dynamic before graduating high school. But in this past year, 1 in 11 and 1 in 14, that is a scary statistic. And 1 in 3 teens witnessing a peer having that experience. We also know that females ages 16 to 24 have the highest rate of experiencing interpersonal violence. And then, to go even further and look at how the impact is disparate, we find that youth from marginalized and underserved communities are facing additional barriers when they're trying to access safety, services, justice. We know that victims from marginalized communities, including people of color, immigrants, LGBTQ plus folks, people with disabilities, often face racial bias, homophobia, discrimination, and that can all influence someone's help-seeking behaviors. It can all influence what happens if and when they do seek help. And so that intersection of the abuse that they're experiencing and then the marginalization within society can create even more barriers and an even more dangerous dynamic for young folks with marginalized identities. When we look at how abuse impacts young folks, it is pretty concrete, the drastic health risks that are in place. And certainly, I want to be very clear that not every person that is abused by a partner is going to have these outcomes, but it does increase risk, right? Young people that are abused by a partner are at much higher risk of substance abuse, risky sexual behavior, eating disorders, future abusive relationships. We also know that for teen girls that have been physically or sexually abused, they're 6 times as likely to get pregnant, twice as likely to contract an STI. We also know that half of youth that have been victims to both dating violence and rape attempt suicide. That's compared to 12.5% of non-abused girls and 5.4% of non-abused boys. Half versus 12.5% and 5.4%, right? We know that there can be huge, huge implications following this type of relationship, right? And it makes sense. This is a critical developmental time. It is incredibly hormonal. It is really a time when teens are separating from their parents and coming into their own identity. And so the impact of it is so, the health risks are so great because it's also largely ignored or unaware, right? Um, I think when you think about parents and their teens and their young relationships, right? That idea of like young love, right? Oh, it's never going to last. And kind of that wisdom that you get a little bit with age about the dynamics. That being said, for those young people, it is incredibly powerful. It is everything in that moment, and it is going to last forever. And so, even though to us it might be minimized, it is not to them, and that mismatch can add to the danger. We also know that by and large, in a poll done by Love is Respect, it found that 81% of parents, right? Most parents think TD, dating violence isn't that big of a deal. And they also felt like, you know what, I would be able to know if my teen was navigating an abusive relationship. And in that same study, it was like 60% of those parents could not correctly identify those signs, right? And so it is really critical for us to be talking about it. What does it look like? How can we tell? Some of the things are obvious, right? Some of these things are things that you might guess, but some of them aren't. Some of them are a little bit more sneaky, a little bit more covert. And so having the awareness, knowing what we're looking for, makes it a lot more easy to spot it. Because teens aren't talking to their parents about it. In fact, only 33% of teens told anyone about the abuse. So not just their parents, but any other human. And so we know that the more that we're aware of it and that we can identify it without someone actually having to come and say, hey, this is happening to me. I'm scared, or what do I do? Or, just wanted you to know this is what's happening. We can kind of be a part of that solution. JBWS has our dating abuse prevention program. We go to local schools and discuss dating abuse in different ways, depending on the age group, from I think it's 7th and 8th grade all the way through young folks at college. And it really is such an amazing program that helps bring awareness, helps encourage bystander intervention, which we know is huge in creating that cultural shift. So if your school doesn't educate about teen dating violence and you'd like to have us in, sometimes it just takes the parents asking the school, say, hey, we know this is available. We'd love to have it for our kids. Sometimes it takes the school hearing from parents. So that is something where it really is making a difference. I know when I went to school, we didn't have education about healthy relationships. I wish that we had. And so the dating abuse prevention program really is so wonderful for young people of all different ages to start thinking about these dynamics and how to talk about them and identify them. So we're going to talk both about warning signs that someone might be being victimized by abuse. And then we're also going to talk about warning signs that someone might be using abuse against a partner, because I know if I was a parent, I wouldn't want either situation for my child, right? Because we know the outcomes for someone that is using abuse in a relationship aren't necessarily going to be very good either, right? If there is law enforcement involvement, or there is any loss of life or permanent injury, you don't want that for your child, for them to do that to someone else. And so as parents, these are all our flock, right? We need to be able to understand this dynamic no matter how it's showing up, or what it looks like. So thinking about, how might I know if my child is in a relationship that's potentially abusive. And I think with anything with signs, we want to be really mindful that one of these things doesn't absolutely indicate, oh my gosh, my kid stopped participating in activities, they must be in an abusive relationship. No, it could be, right? Could be part of it, but we want to really um these things kind of in a handful, right? This, when we've got a couple indicators, a few indicators, that's when we're really starting to build our concern. Um, I already kind of talked about that dynamic of stopping seeing friends. And, sometimes with young folks that can happen. I think with any relationship that can happen. You're just so into that person. You want to spend a lot of time together. Um, but if that is happening, but the person's like, oh, I really miss my friends, that's a mismatch, right? Oh, you're not wanting to spend all that time with your partner. Is it, what's going on there? Are you being coerced into that? What does that mean? Certainly, my not participating in activities could be a part of that isolation. It could be that my partner wants me to spend my time with them and not in my activities. Or if I have to ask them if it's okay for me to engage in a certain activity. Changes in clothing or appearance, I think, is a big one, right? Because it could be just that I switched my style up, or it could be, if I'm like dressing much more conservatively, it could be that my partner is controlling, how they want me to look, or that they're changing my style to suit what they want, which again, doesn't, a lot of people might say, well, so what? Oh, they like that style and want you to dress in that style. And again, stand alone, that's okay. But it can also be kind of like an early little control thing. It's like, babe, I want you to wear that instead. I only want you to dress like sexy for me. And again, that's just kind of building that foundation of that person being in control, right? Something low level, like what I'm wearing, but it builds, right? Then once they have control over what I'm wearing, then it can be other things. When we think about, well, how do I know if my child is maybe being abusive to somebody else? I think jealousy is a huge one for me. That idea of, jealousy in itself isn't bad. It's not wrong to feel jealous, right? If someone, $100 bills rain down in a room and everybody gets one but you somehow, going to be jealous a little bit, probably, right? Who doesn't want $100 bill? But if you're using your jealousy to coerce others or to try to control their behavior, right? That's what makes the jealousy in an abusive situation so dangerous, is that it's used as a tool to control, right? It's used in that kind of dynamic to gain control, right? Oh, I just love you so much that I don't want you talking to other guys because it makes me so jealous. And, so then I'm modifying my behavior. Again, that kind of just this low level dynamic of establishing that control. I do want to play a really amazing PSA. It's called Because I Love You. It was put together by the One Love Foundation. And I think it just does such an amazing job of kind of displaying that dynamic of the way that this control can be slowly kind of woven in.
Because I love you. I want to be your only guy.
Because I love you, skip class with me. Let's stay in bed today.
Because I love you, I just want to be with you so freaking much.
Because I love you.
I waited for you after Chem Lab.
You were walking with Mark?
Because I love you.
You shouldn't be hanging out with that dude.
You should know how dumb that makes me look.
I don't care if she's your lab partner.
Why do you have texts from him?
Because I love you. This number,
Delete.
Because I love you. This Jason number,
Delete.
And Ben,
Delete.
because I love you, I should smash your phone.
I'll let you give me your password instead.
Because I love you.
I will check your texts every day.
You got lucky. Because I love you.
Because I love you.
You think it's okay.
Because I love you. You understand.
Because I love you, you stop talking to your classmates.
and you feel completely alone.
Because I love you. That's not love.
So I think, that clip really shows us how that phrase can be used to manipulate and really bend the situation to kind of get you to do what I want under that guise of because I love you. I also want to point out the too much too soon. This, the fast pace of an abusive partnership is by design, because the more connected we are, the quicker we've become intimate, the faster our relationship is moving, the harder it is to disconnect from that relationship, the more you have invested. And so that rushing into things can often be another big red flag that can go unnoticed, that can kind of fly under the radar of a lot of folks, parents, teens, everybody. I also want to take a moment to really mention the huge risk factors with technology abuse for teens. I think some of the trends that I've seen and my coworkers in that dating abuse prevention program have seen is that there seems to be kind of a understanding or acceptance that some level of tech control is normal or indicative of trust. And by that, I mean, if you were trustworthy, you would give me your password, versus you're trustworthy, so I don't need your password because I trust you, right? So it's more of that idea of like proving it. And certainly, teens are just connected to their phones. I think we're all super connected to technology in our phones. I say as I give a presentation on technology with my phone in front of me, but teens especially. And this constant checking in, nonstop text messages with the expectation to respond, a lot of the time overnight, sometimes 30 times hourly, between midnight and 5 a.m. That incessant kind of harassment, right? Just nonstop, is actually identified by young women as more difficult to deal with than requests for intimate photos. Young women were less bothered by a request for an intimate photo than that nonstop, constant badgering over text message. And so I'm going to play another PSA that really kind of gives a great look into what that might look like for a young person. And this one is through oh my goodness, I forgot the name of it now. That's not cool.com, which is part of the national movement, national programs raising awareness about dating abuse.
G morning, sunshine. Wakey, wakey. Text me back. Hey, did you tell your parents about us? Let's skip first period together. Did you get all my texts? Is practice over yet? Where are you at? Are you with your friends? That's L-A-A-A-A-M-M-E-E-E. Capital X, lowercase o, capital X, lowercase o. I love you. JK, I hate you. JK. Are you ignoring me? We're in a huge fight right now. Is this something I did? I can see your lights on. I'm coming over. What'd you dream about? Me? I'm lonely. Holla back. Holla back. Let's try something new. Nude pics. Send me some. Text me.
So I love that clip because I think it really gets to the heart of what is happening. And I love the message at the end. When does caring become controlling? Because sometimes that constant attention can feel good to young people. But then there's a turn where it's like, leave me alone, or why do you need to know what I'm doing every second? And certainly you can see how that young person may think to themselves, I wonder if they'll leave me alone if I send them a picture. And that's some dangerous territory, because we know once that picture is sent, it can't be unsent. And that if this person is someone that wants to use abuse and control, that having that picture is certainly going to be held over my head later down the road. If I were to ever try to break up, then it's, well, I'm going to, share that picture with your parents. Or if they have my social media passwords, go on there and post that picture on my social media, then change my password so I can't take it down. And so, that doesn't mean that every person that sends an intimate photo to their partner is going to have that experience. But it does mean that when someone is in a relationship where there is that pressure, where there is that harassment, they may send a photo that they wouldn't have sent otherwise. And that may then be used kind of against them later on, right? And so all these dynamics playing together are part of what makes it so dangerous, right? No matter how old the person being abused is, these things make the dynamics dangerous. And so, certainly thinking about all these different dynamics of abuse and the way that teens are impacted, a lot of people are thinking, well, just break up. Why wouldn't you break up? And certainly if someone wants to break up with an abusive partner, agencies like JBWS are here to assist in how to plan to do that safely and how to navigate those dynamics. But what's important to know is that the majority of people that lose their lives to intimate partner violence, intimate partner homicide, it is after they've left that person. And that's because it's about power and control. And me leaving is me taking that power and control back. And when someone wants power and control, they escalate to maintain it, right? That kind of without thinking, that escalation, right? Using more force, like an umbrella in the wind, right? Just automatically using more force to maintain that control. We're in this situation, it can be really dangerous. And unfortunately, young people have lost their lives and do lose their lives to dating violence. And so the fear that someone has that might happen if they leave their partner is valid. And it shouldn't be ignored or minimized. breaking up doesn't solve this problem. My gosh, I wish it did. I would have a different line of work if it did. Agencies like JBWS wouldn't need to exist if the partner just, you know, breaking up with that person was the end of the problems. That being said, breaking up might not be what they want to do, right? Maybe they love that person and they believe their promises to change, and everybody in their dating circle had, or in their friend circle has a relationship. And now they haven't really been hanging out with their friends as much. And so their intimate partner has really become almost like their whole world, right? And maybe they don't understand that what they're experiencing is abuse. Maybe it's never been physical. And so they're looking at it thinking, oh, this person can be like kind of jerky sometimes, or I don't like how they get when they're really jealous, you know, but I just, you know, I can change my behavior so that they're not so jealous. And, you know, this has been such an amazing relationship, except for those few times when it was kind of scary a little bit, but you know, that person was just having a bad day. And again, you know, I knew that it made them upset when I, you know, wear short skirts, right? So I can just not do that. And so all of these things can work together to create a barrier to me recognizing that my relationship is abusive, to being able to navigate out of it if that's what I want to do. You know, and what if, let's say my last class of the day, this person is in it. How am I going to get off campus without them? How? I could maybe involve the school, and maybe they'll be sympathetic and provide some sort of solutions. Maybe not. Maybe that'll just upset the person that is abusing me, right? That I shared that with the school. So there's a lot of things, right? I think sometimes we're like, oh, it's your teens. What do you don't have kids? You don't have a house together. It should be so easy, but it's not, right? It's not just so cut and dry. There's a lot of things to think about and a lot of dynamics at play. We also know, right, teens are separating from their parents, trying to be independent, really developing who they are in relationships and kind of how they stand amongst their peers, and how they develop in an intimate partner relationship is part of this. And so again, there might be less interest in talking to parents about it, and even kind of talking to their peers about it. That need to be kind of independent and figure it out on their own is just another factor to kind of take into account. So when you're thinking about how to talk to your teens about it, if you are concerned that your teen might be in an abusive relationship, or that their partner is perhaps controlling, or that they are controlling of their partner, you definitely want to try as much as possible to remain calm. You also want to make sure that you're not minimizing the relationship, because you're going to lose a lot of credibility if you say, oh, you're never going to end up with this person. No more listening, right? You don't know anything. I am going to end up with them. You know, you're just old and mad that you didn't marry your high school sweetheart. Whatever, teens love to give sass, right? So whatever they might say. And just kind of embody that this is serious to them, which makes it serious, right? And perhaps that 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 years perspective could add some value, but really try to just embody that this is serious, this is important to them. And so let's acknowledge it as serious. Knowing that your kids are going to be reading you, looking at your reactions, looking for how you're feeling about it. And be really concrete. say, I noticed that you kind of like checked with your boyfriend before you agreed to family dinner. And it just seemed odd that you would, need to check with that person. And, I just wanted you to know, like, you're allowed to do whatever you want to do. And I wanted you to really think about how it might seem if if I made you check in with me about everything, right? At this point, now that you're an adult and you're on your own. And so, or you're a young adult and you're, whatever it is they don't have to check in with you about. But try to be as specific as possible. You can mention, I noticed that people not seeing their friends and disconnecting from activities can be a warning sign. You haven't seemed yourself lately. I just wanted to check in and see if you're okay, right? Opening that door to communication more than once, right? Kind of frequently and in different ways. And be really mindful to not try to force a breakup. I think, again, let's remember that a breakup doesn't mean safety. In fact, the opposite, right? Increases the danger. You forcing a breakup can increase the danger for someone that's half invested, and that increases the danger even more. It can also kind of make it so that your teen doesn't want to talk to you about it anymore, right? Even if they had opened up to you and shared something, if you try to force that, it may just drive them into the arms of the abusive partner. Oh, excuse me. And, I think sometimes what happens there is that if I care about, I'm worried about my teen and I see that there's all these warning signs that there's abuse, and I just don't want them, from a good place, right? Don't want them to be with this person anymore. They deserve to have someone that values them. So I want them to break up. But that then creates a space for the abusive partner to say, oh, babe, no one gets us. It's us against the world. And because that person wants isolation, right? That is part of their abusive web. That person is going to take full advantage of any stretch or any split in their victim's relationship with parents and friends, right? And take that as a way to further isolate them, right? Don't talk to them about our problems. They don't get it, whatever the case may be. But it really, really can drive that wedge. These tactics are, when you're talking about concerns about a relationship, but I think really any of this information can be shared with your teens, just in a kind of way like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how common this was. Even just engaging young people in conversations about the fact that it's happening, right? What it looks like. I didn't realize that X, Y, and Z was a warning sign. Maybe your teens are like, oh my gosh, you're such a loser, but you just educated them about a warning sign. Talk to your schools about getting this information in there, because I think those spaces where youth are talking amongst each other, right, guided by one of our DAP counselors, really is such a powerful tool for young people to unpack these dynamics with each other, right? Holding each other accountable, creating that culture of upstander versus bystander. These are some helpful resources, some websites that might be wonderful for you as parents, as well as some of our services in case you needed to access any of those. I already mentioned our dating abuse prevention program. Also, our helpline is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Anyone can contact that. If anything from this presentation this evening got you thinking, you want to check in about, something that you've seen with your teen or in your own relationship, our helpline is always available to help people just talk about their relationships, understand what resources are available, and understand DV. And since we know that right now with COVID, not everyone is able to get to a phone, I also wanted to offer the National Domestic Violence Hotline text line. You can text Love Is to 1-866-3311. I'm sorry, 1-866-331-9474, or go to the hotline.org to do an online text chat about abuse. This is just another cool way to share our helpline number. You can see there 973-267-4763 is the helpline number. And if you write that out on a scrap of paper and total it up like you are just trying to figure out if you can afford what you're buying at the store, someone might not realize, right? If I'm being abused, I might be able to have this information in my purse without anyone thinking that this is the number for helpline services. And of course, make sure you are following us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. There are so many ways to connect and support JBWS and raise awareness about the mission. And you can find out about all those and stay connected on our social media. These are the resources from tonight's session, and I just want to thank everyone for joining me, and I hope you learned something, and I hope that you and all the teens in your life are a little bit safer having had this presentation, and that you have a wonderful evening.